At 12:40 on the afternoon of June 16, 1990, a small handwritten sign appeared on the door of an antique shop in North Wales. It contained only 4 words: "Back in 2 minutes." The shopkeeper had left her handbag, jacket, and car keys inside. Her car remained parked nearby. Everything suggested she planned to return almost immediately. But Trevelyan Evans never came back. Later that afternoon, she was reportedly seen near her home. Then the trail ended in the middle of a busy town, in daylight, without a confirmed witness to whatever happened next. More than 3 decades later, the note is still remembered. The promised 2 minutes have become one of Britain's most baffling unsolved disappearances. In 1990, 52-year-old Trevelyan Evans was a familiar, welcoming presence in Llangollen, a historic market town nestled in the Dee Valley of North Wales. Having spent most of her life in this close-knit community, she was widely known as a warm, highly sociable woman who easily made friends with both local residents and the tourists who frequented the scenic area. For Trevaline, the town was her home and the setting for a long-held personal ambition. In 1989, she finally realized her dream by opening Attic Antiques, a small shop located on Church Street, just a short walk from the busy thoroughfares of Castle Street and Market Street. Inside, the space was filled with a carefully gathered selection of vintage furniture, delicate porcelain ornaments, oil paintings, and various historical objects that she loved to collect. Attic Antiques quickly became a social hub. Customers and neighbors frequently dropped by to browse the shelves and spend time talking with Trevelyan, who always had time for a quiet conversation. Her presence in the shop was a thread in the daily fabric of the town. She was an ordinary, settled part of Llangollen's quiet routine, operating within an environment where neighbors knew one another and sudden departures were virtually unheard of. On Saturday, June 16, 1990, the morning in Llangollen began with clear skies, warm sunshine, and a busy weekend crowd. Trevelyan Evans opened the doors of Attic Antiques at approximately 9:30 a.m., establishing what seemed to be a completely routine day. She had driven to work in her dark blue Ford Escort estate, parking the vehicle about 200 yards away from the shop on Church Street. It was a standard parking spot she regularly used, and the car remained parked in that exact location throughout the weekend, untouched and unmoved. Inside the shop, the morning hours proceeded with a familiar, social rhythm. Over the course of the forenoon, approximately 25 friends, regular customers, and passing tourists stopped by the premises. Some came to browse the collection of vintage furniture and porcelain, while others simply paused to chat with Trevelyan, who was a well-liked figure in the neighborhood. Those who spoke with her during these hours reported that she was entirely relaxed, cheerful, and secure. There was no visible sign of anxiety, no unusual telephone calls, and no indication that she was preoccupied, distressed, or preparing for any sort of sudden departure. In fact, while talking with several visitors, Trevelyan mentioned her plans to attend a social function later that evening, reinforcing the general impression that she was looking forward to her normal weekend routine. The town was lively, with clear visibility and heavy foot traffic outside, and the steady stream of people in and out of Attic Antiques provided a peaceful, documented baseline of a typical Saturday in North Wales. 2 days before Trevelyan Evans vanished, witnesses noticed an unfamiliar presence near Attic Antiques. On both Thursday, June 14th, and Friday, June 15th, a distinguished-looking man was seen conversing with Trevelyan outside the shop. Observers described him as pale-complexioned, wearing a navy blue suit or jacket and carrying a black briefcase. During the initial investigation, police circulated a composite sketch of this individual, hoping to identify him. However, years later, North Wales Police officially qualified this lead, stating that the artist's impression should no longer be considered accurate. The man's identity was never established, and investigators could never confirm whether he was a customer, a personal acquaintance, or someone entirely unrelated to her life. On Saturday, June 16th, at approximately 12:40 p.m., the physical mystery of Trevelyan's disappearance began with a handwritten message. She placed a sign on the door of Attic Antiques reading, "Back in 2 minutes," and locked the shop. While the wording indicates she expected a brief absence, the physical evidence left behind suggests she did not plan to go far, if she planned to leave at all. Inside the undisturbed shop, investigators found her handbag, her jacket, and her car keys. There were no signs of a struggle. No witnesses reported seeing Trevaline step out onto Church Street at that exact moment, and there is no record of her ever returning to the shop. For over 3 decades, this simple handwritten note has remained at the center of public appeals, representing not necessarily the moment of her disappearance, but the final documented act she took before stepping away from her livelihood. At approximately 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a shop assistant working on High Street recorded that Trevaline purchased an apple and a single banana. Immediately after this transaction, a local resident observed her crossing Castle Street, heading away from the commercial center toward the residential neighborhoods of Llangollen. This specific movement represents a significant anchor within the early afternoon timeline, yet its ultimate meaning remains bound to a physical item recovered during the subsequent investigation of attic antiques. During the subsequent search of the premises, investigating police recovered a discarded banana peel from a small waste bin inside the shop. While this item appeared to offer a tangible connection to her afternoon movements, subsequent forensic analysis could not establish that this specific peel originated from the banana purchased at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. This ambiguity leaves investigators with 2 incompatible readings, each carrying profound implications for the overall timeline. In the first scenario, Trevaline returned to the shop, consumed the banana, threw the peel into the waste bin, and subsequently left the property a second time. This implies that the handwritten "back in 2 minutes" note was pinned to the front door during this second, unrecorded departure, rather than her initial exit. In the second scenario, she did not return to the premises at all. This means the shop sat entirely empty and unlocked for more than 2 hours prior to the next reported sighting, and the discarded peel itself played no part in that afternoon's events, having been left there on an earlier date. The chronological sequence continues at approximately 2:30 in the afternoon, when an acquaintance reported seeing a woman matching Trevaline's description walking along Market Street, close to her personal residence. Investigators eventually designated this Market Street account as the final working sighting of her afternoon, treating it as the last credible anchor. Although regarded as a primary reference point for establishing her whereabouts, this specific report relies entirely on personal recall rather than objective physical verification, leaving its chronological accuracy subject to the inherent limitations of human memory. Past this point, the timeline fractures into 2 separate, uncorroborated reports that cannot be reconciled into a logical path. Approximately 5 minutes after the Market Street sighting, at 2:35 in the afternoon, a motorist reported seeing a woman matching her general appearance walking toward Corwin along the A5 near the edge of the Riverside Park. An hour later, at approximately 3:45 in the afternoon, a separate, unconfirmed report placed a woman of similar description walking into Park Avenue from the direction of the River Dee. Because police could never verify either sighting with objective evidence, these accounts must exist as isolated, conflicting reports rather than confirmed segments of a continuous route, leaving the final path of the afternoon unresolved. By Saturday evening, attic antiques remained locked. The handwritten note stayed taped to the glass, and Trevelyan Evans had not returned to her home. Her husband, Richard Evans, grew increasingly concerned when she failed to appear for their pre-arranged dinner plans. Later that night, the family's alarm led them to contact North Wales Police, officially reporting her missing. The initial response from North Wales Police quickly grew into one of the most intensive search efforts in the region's history. Officers began canvassing the historic market town of Llangollen, visiting local households and questioning business owners and residents along the busy streets. The sheer scale of the inquiry was designed to leave no stone unturned. Over the following weeks, investigators checked more than 1,500 names of residents, tourists, and potential witnesses. They systematically examined approximately 700 vehicles, ruling them out one by one as they searched for any car that might have been out of place on that warm June afternoon. At the same time, physical search teams moved outward from the town center to the challenging terrain of the surrounding countryside. They swept the banks and fast-flowing waters of the River Dee, as well as the adjacent Llangollen Canal. Specialist units descended into local caves, abandoned mine shafts, and remote woodlands. Despite these exhaustive efforts, the searchers found no clothing, no discarded personal belongings, and no biological traces. Investigators could not establish a single confirmed crime scene. There was simply no physical evidence of a struggle, a medical emergency, or a forced abduction. This total absence of physical clues extended to Trevaline's financial life. According to the reported position of North Wales Police, no transactions occurred on any of her bank accounts after the afternoon of her disappearance. However, because public banking records from the case have never been released for independent audit, this remains a reported investigative position rather than a publicly verified record. For Richard Evans and the rest of the family, the days turned into weeks of agonizing silence, leaving investigators with a massive paper trail but no physical path forward. To make sense of this silence, every explanation for Trevaline's disappearance must be tested against three questions. What does it explain? What does it conflict with? And what extra assumptions does it require? Consider first the theory of a sudden accident, perhaps a fall into the River Dee, the nearby canal, or one of the many caves and abandoned mine workings in the surrounding rural hills. This idea explains why Trevaline never returned to her shop and why her vehicle remained parked on Church Street. However, it conflicts directly with the physical evidence. Intensive search teams thoroughly swept the local waterways and the rugged landscape, finding no clothing, personal items, or physical remains of any kind. To accept an accident, one must assume that Trevaline traveled to a hazardous location for no documented reason, suffered a sudden mishap, and ended up in a spot that somehow eluded highly systematic police searches. A second possibility is a voluntary disappearance. Leaving a handwritten note saying she would return in 2 minutes could have been a deliberate misdirection to buy time. Yet this explanation conflicts with almost every physical fact established at the scene. Trevaline left behind her handbag, her jacket, her car keys, and her parked car. She had clear social plans for that evening, and her bank accounts showed no financial activity after June 16th. To believe she chose to walk away, one must assume she had a secret, unrecorded means of starting a new life from scratch, without money, identification, or personal belongings, and managed to completely evade detection for over 3 decades. A third scenario involves an arranged meeting with someone she knew or trusted. This explains the brief, casual nature of the note, suggesting she expected to step out for a quick, private conversation. It also explains why she walked away without her coat or keys. But this theory conflicts with her known records. Investigators found no diary entries, phone logs, or witness statements identifying a secret contact. Accepting this requires assuming she maintained a highly private relationship entirely hidden from her family, and that this meeting unexpectedly turned fatal. Finally, there is the possibility of an opportunistic abduction or sudden foul play. This explains why she vanished so quickly during an ordinary Saturday afternoon. However, it conflicts with the physical environment. Llangollen was a bustling market town on a warm, clear weekend, crowded with tourists and local residents. An abduction in broad daylight on busy streets without a single witness reporting an assault, a struggle, or someone being forced into a vehicle is highly improbable. This explanation requires the assumption that a predator acted with absolute silence, flawless execution, and perfect, undetected timing. Trevelyan Evans did not simply vanish in 2 minutes. She left behind a window of nearly 2 hours that investigators cannot reconstruct. What happened after she stepped away from her shop and left that final handwritten note? We invite you to share your theories in the comments, keeping in mind that no person has ever been convicted or proven responsible for her disappearance. Subscribe to the Unsolved Record for more cases where one missing detail may hold the answer. In January 2001, more than a decade after the disappearance, North Wales Police reopened the case, establishing a major incident room staffed by 10 officers. Investigators hoped that recent advances in forensic science and DNA profiling might extract new clues from the original evidence. During this renewed inquiry, detectives arrested Trevaline's husband, Richard Evans, then 72 years old. He was questioned and released without charge the same day, with police later confirming that he had been cleared of any involvement. Under British law, an arrest is a procedural step, not evidence of guilt, and no court has ever found Richard Evans responsible for his wife's disappearance. The cold case review also led investigators to examine potential links to convicted killers. Detectives briefly considered Robin Legas, a Shropshire man convicted of 3 murders, including that of an antiques dealer. But after comparing his methods and timeline, police ruled out any connection. Decades later, between 2021 and 2022, public speculation and media reports attempted to link the case to Christopher Halliwell, a convicted double murderer who had worked as a window fitter in North Wales in 1990. North Wales police reviewed the claim, but found no verified evidence establishing any involvement by Halliwell, and the lead remains entirely speculative. In 2019, a different set of public claims emerged. 2 brothers, Andrew and Lee Sutton, asserted that imaging from a specialist camera showed what appeared to be human remains under the floorboards of the Rudlin Golf Club. The Evans family had a historical connection to the Rudlin area, having owned a holiday bungalow nearby. Based on this tip, North Wales police conducted an excavation of the golf club premises in March 2019, but search teams found no remains. The brothers later claimed that the material had been clandestinely removed shortly before the police arrived, though no physical evidence supports this assertion. Following the search, a metallic plaque appeared on a public bench near the golf club, carrying a cryptic inscription that claimed Trevaline's remains had been discovered there and subsequently moved. A separate, anonymous note with a similar message was found on a nearby bench in 2022. The author of these messages was never identified, and despite the public attention they generated, neither the bench plaques nor the golf club claims have ever produced any physical or independently verified proof. 30 years of subsequent leads have expanded the file, but none have bridged the gap left on Church Street. The handwritten sign left on the door of Attic Antiques remains a deceptive starting point. It suggests a swift, ordinary errand, reflecting only what Trevelyan Evans expected to happen when she turned the key. But a person's plans at midday do not dictate what occurs once they step out onto the street. Instead of marking the physical moment of her disappearance, the note simply marks the boundary where verified documentation ends and speculation begins. Between Church Street, Castle Street, and Market Street lies a small, quiet network of roads that Trevelyan knew intimately. Yet within this narrow geography, investigators face an almost 2-hour window that has never been fully reconstructed. The timeline tells us she was still in Llangollen long after she locked the shop, yet it cannot tell us why she did not return or who she might have met along the way. An accident, an unexpected encounter, a meeting with a trusted acquaintance, or a sudden act of violence all remain possibilities, none of them proven. Despite decades of searches, forensic reviews, and public claims, no physical trace has ever been recovered, and no individual has ever been held responsible. The reality is that Trevelyan Evans did not simply vanish in 2 minutes. She walked into a quiet afternoon, leaving behind an empty shop, a locked car, and an unanswered question that remains suspended in the silence of Llangollen. Today, the passage of time threatens to erase the remaining physical leads. As witnesses age and memories fade, the window for answers narrows. The true tragedy lies in the enduring silence left behind. This quiet corner of Wales reminds us how easily a life can slip through the cracks. Until the truth emerges, a family remains forever waiting on the threshold.